The moon hung heavy above the silver pine pack, swollen and golden like an omen, its light spilling across the clearing where the entire pack had gathered. It was a night of tradition, celebration, fate, the mate reveal ceremony, the night when the moon goddess marked soul-bonded wolves and sealed their destiny. For everyone else it was a fairy tale. For Rhea Arden, it was the night her world would fall apart. Her breath came in shallow bursts as she stood at the edge of the circle, just behind the elders. The crisp scent of pine clung to her skin, but underneath it was a film of sweat from anxiety. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the satin strap of the silver dress she'd borrowed, a dress that clung too tight to her curves and left her feeling exposed. She could feel the eyes of the pack on her, curious, prying, judgmental. You shouldn't be here. You're beta-born, barely ranked. Why would the moon pick you? But Rhea had hope. Dangerous, stupid hope. Because Alpha Kyle Rowan, the son of the Alpha, the soon-to-be leader of the entire Silverpine pack, had been watching her. Their eyes had locked more times than she could count. In the training grounds, in the dining hall, once after she tripped during sparring and he helped her up, holding her hand a heartbeat too long. She wasn't delusional. She felt something, an unspoken pull. And tonight, everything would change. Rhea Arden, Elder Mila called, her voice echoing like thunder in the expectant hush. Step forward. The ground felt unsteady beneath her heels. Her heart thudded as she walked into the circle, her gaze instantly locking onto Kyle, standing tall at the opposite end, dressed in ceremonial black, his broad shoulders tense beneath the velvet-lined coat. His golden brown eyes pierced through her, unreadable. He didn't smile, but he didn't look away either. She exhaled slowly and stepped into the moonbeam. A chill raced down her spine, her skin igniting like fire as her wolf stirred violently inside her. This was it. She could feel it, the bond. The rush of it built like a wave, thundering through her soul. Her bones ached with recognition. Her heart screamed his name. She was his. She was his mate. Gasps erupted around the circle as a silver glow shimmered along her arms, the unmistakable light of a bonded female. Her mouth opened in disbelief, and her head turned to Kyle, heart leaping in raw joy. His aura flared, alpha, power, rage. And then, his lips parted. His voice was cold, flat, measured. I reject you, Rhea Arden. The clearing went deadly still. She blinked. Once. Twice. Her wolf yowled in agony inside her, claws raking against her insides. Her knees buckled. And Tai said, his voice sliced deeper this time, crueler, and I reject you. You are weak, unworthy of an alpha. I do not accept this bond. You are not my equal, and I will not dishonor my pack by claiming you. A murmur of gasps and hushed whispers swept through the onlookers like wildfire. The elders looked between each other in shock. Rhea stood frozen in place, her breath trapped in her throat like glass shards. Kale had rejected her, not in private, not with kindness, publicly, like she was some kind of joke. The silver light flickered off her skin and vanished. Why? She whispered, her voice barely audible. He looked her up and down with disdain. Oh, you're nothing special, Rhea. The moon made a mistake. And then he turned his back on her. Just like that. Her wolf let out a howl so feral it tore through her chest. Rhea stumbled out of the circle, tears blinding her, the shocked stares of her pack searing her like brands. She didn't remember making it to the woods. She didn't remember collapsing beneath a tree, clutching her ribs, trying to breathe past the searing agony of rejection, her bond unraveling inside her like a cord snapping one thread at a time. Each snap a scream, each break a betrayal. She vomited bile. Her hands scraped at the earth like it could swallow her whole. He rejected me. She was supposed to be his. The moon had chosen. And he still said no. The stars wheeled above her in cruel silence. And far, far away in a city she'd never dared to enter, Lucien Blackthorne was signing a contract worth $100 million, sealing a deal over. A glass of blood-red wine, unaware that his world was about to be torn apart by a broken girl with silver eyes and a heart made of ash. 3 weeks. That's how long it had been since Rhea Arden had been rejected by her mate, since her bond had shattered like glass in her chest and left behind pieces too jagged to ever put back together, since she had become nothing. No pack, no name, no future. She was rogue now. And in the werewolf world, that meant she was as good as dead. Rhea pulled her threadbare coat tighter around her shivering frame as she walked along the cracked sidewalk of Eastbourne, a grime-covered industrial district at the edge of the human city. It was always raining here, an endless drizzle that soaked through your skin and made you feel like you were drowning even when your lungs were empty. Her boots, too big for her feet, and stolen from a charity bin, sloshed through shallow puddles of oil-streaked water. The cold had seeped into her bones days ago and hadn't left. She hadn't shifted once since the rejection. Her wolf, once fiery and bold, was now curled into a tight ball inside her, silent, as if mourning, as if dead. Rhea's stomach growled, sharp and violent. She hadn't eaten since yesterday, when a kind old woman behind a food truck had given her a half-eaten sandwich and a pitiful look. Rhea didn't even remember thanking her, just scarfed it down like an animal and walked away before she could cry in front of another stranger. This wasn't what she was supposed to be. She was raised in a pack, trained in discipline. She had a quiet, careful dignity to her. She wasn't a beggar. But that had been before Kyle opened his mouth and carved her worth out of her like a surgeon removing something infected. I reject you. 3 words that had turned her to ash. The shelter on 92nd Street was full. Again. She'd tried twice that week already, and both times she'd been turned away. No ID, no documents, no paper trail, and definitely no knowledge of human bureaucracy. She knew only how to fight, to run, to track, to kill if she had to. That was what the Silver Pine Warriors were trained for. But none of those skills earned you a hot meal in the city, so she did what she had been doing every night for the past 10 days. She slept in the alley behind the Crimson Rose, a sleazy bar near the train tracks that reeked of beer, piss, and danger. But it was warm. Sometimes. And if she curled behind the dumpster, the wind wouldn't cut her as badly. She dropped her backpack beside her usual corner. It was pitifully light, just a thin blanket, a rusted switchblade, and a journal she'd found in a trash bin. She hadn't written in it, just liked the way it felt in her hands, like maybe one day she'd have something worth saying. She pulled the blanket around her shoulders and leaned against the brick wall. Her fingers trembled, her face was numb. She hadn't looked in a mirror in days, but she could feel the change in herself. The hollowness beneath her cheeks, the sunken eyes, the wildness in her gaze that hadn't been there before, the kind that came from being unwanted, not just unloved, unworthy. She tilted her head up to the gray sky, her eyes stinging. The clouds shifted, revealing a pale sliver of the moon, cold and expressionless. I did everything right, she whispered to it. Her voice was raw. And I trained. I obeyed. I protected our young. I waited for him. No answer. Of course not. The moon goddess had already spoken. And Kyle had silenced her. Somewhere down the alley, a glass bottle shattered. Male laughter followed. Rhea tensed, fingers curling around the handle of her blade. 2 humans stumbled into the alley, drunk and shouting. She kept still, holding her breath. See that chick at the bar? One of them slurred. Fangs, bro, I swear to God. And no way. Not another freakin' were. The door to the bar banged open, interrupting them. This time she heard it, the growl, deep, ferocious. Not human. Something slammed against the metal door, hard enough to dent it. A scream followed, wet, gurgled. Rhea was on her feet instantly, her back against the wall, her wolf flickering weakly in warning. Whatever was happening inside the Crimson Rose, it wasn't human business. Then the door burst open, and someone staggered out, clutching their throat. Blood. So much blood. The man collapsed at her feet, gasping like a fish, his neck shredded, not clawed, bitten. Rhea backed away, chest heaving. And then he stepped into the alley. Lucien Blackthorne. She didn't know his name yet. Not officially, but the moment her eyes landed on him, something primal flared through her. Not a bond, not a mate call, something older. Darker. He was tall, built like a war god in black-on-black tailored suits, with a long coat fluttering in the wind like a shadow's cloak. His hair was raven dark, swept back with a casual arrogance, and his eyes, cold, silver, glowing faintly in the dark like polished metal. Not from a pack. She could smell it instantly. His aura was different, controlled, coiled, like a predator who had no rules left to follow. Another man followed him out, hands bloody, dressed in designer leather with gold chains around his throat. Lucien, he said breathlessly. "In the girl." She ran into the crowd. Lucien looked down at the dying man near Rhea's feet, then at her. His gaze didn't move, didn't blink. He stared at her like he was peeling back her skin and reading every secret underneath. "You're not from here," he said. His voice was smooth, low, dangerous. Rhea's throat tightened. She gripped her blade tighter. Tall, I don't want trouble." He tilted his head slightly. "And you already have it." Something about him didn't trigger her fear. Not like the others. Not like Kyle had. Lucien's power wasn't the kind that sought to dominate. It warned, it tested, like it was asking her if she was worth keeping alive. His eyes dropped briefly to her shaking hands. "Tear freezing." She didn't respond. Not in the habit of rescuing strays. He continued coolly, walking toward her. The other man watched with a confused glance but said nothing. Lucien stopped just a foot away, towering over her. He reached into his coat and tossed something at her feet. A black card, embossed in gold. "Sign to this address, tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. if you want a job, if you want to live." She stared at it, then back up at him. "Why?" she whispered. Because," he said, turning without looking back. "And so you look like someone who's been destroyed by an alpha before. And I make it my business to own what they throw away." Rhea didn't sleep that night. The black card burned a hole in her pocket the entire time she sat curled under her blanket, shaking from cold, hunger, and something else she refused to name. Fear, maybe. Or curiosity. Or the echo of his voice. "When you look like someone who's been destroyed by an alpha before, and I make it my business to own what they throw away." She didn't know if it was an offer or a threat. By dawn, the city looked washed out, soaked in gray light that seemed to bleach the buildings of color. A bitter wind rolled through Eastburn, carrying with it the scent of frost and smoke. Rhea stood in front of a grimy gas station mirror, splashing water on her face, using a napkin to rub at the dirt under her eyes. The reflection that stared back at her was barely recognizable. Hollow eyes, cracked lips, hair wild around her face. But there was something burning in her expression. Survival. At 7:44 a.m., she stood outside a gleaming black skyscraper in the heart of Eastburn's financial district, a place that felt more like a city built for gods than people. The building stretched 30 stories into the air, black glass catching the early morning sun like the edge of a blade. Engraved in gold above the entrance, Blackthorne Industries, it might as well have said, "Enter if you dare." Rhea clutched the card tightly in her gloved hand, staring up at the building like it could devour her. Her breath fogged the air. Her fingers were numb. "You don't belong here. You're not worthy of this. Go back to the alley. Die there quietly." Her wolf stirred, barely a flicker, a nudge against her ribs. Not today. She walked inside. The lobby was cathedral-like. Marble floors, obsidian columns, chandeliers shaped like inverted daggers, and humans in black suits whispering into earpieces. None of them looked at her, but they felt her. She was a trespasser. "Can I help you?" asked the front desk woman, her voice neutral but clipped, like she was professionally trained not to be surprised by anything, even someone who looked like they'd slept in a dumpster. Rhea slid the card across the desk. The woman's eyes flicked down, then up. Her demeanor changed instantly. "I'll notify Mr. Blackthorne's executive team. You may take the elevator to the 27th floor. Do not press any other buttons." "Wait, he wants to see me?" The woman's lips twitched. "If you had not been expected, Miss Arden, you would not have made it through the building's perimeter scan. You're already in the system." The system? How had he even known her name? Rhea stepped into the elevator alone. The walls were dark glass. As the elevator began its silent ascent, her reflection multiplied. Versions of herself fading in and out like ghosts, staring back with widened eyes. She had no idea what was waiting for her. But she had nothing to lose. The 27th floor was quiet. Not just physically, the kind of silence that whispered of violence underneath marble floors and luxury wood paneling. The walls were lined with oil paintings, not landscapes but wolves, massive ones, ferocious, each one frozen mid-howl, mid-leap, mid-kill. Her breath caught at the realism, at the way their eyes seemed to follow her. She didn't belong here, but she kept walking. A glass door at the end of the corridor slid open automatically, revealing a large office space. sleek, minimalistic, drenched in shadows despite the floor-to-ceiling windows behind the man seated at the desk. Lucien Blackthorne. He didn't look up right away, just tapped away on a thin silver laptop, a glass of red liquid beside him. Rhea's wolf twitched nervously. The scent was unmistakable. Not wine. Blood. "Sit," he said without glancing up. She sat. "Own name?" She blinked. "Oh, you already... So I want to hear you say it." She swallowed. "Rhea Arden." His fingers paused over the keyboard. Then he slowly looked up. And really looked at her. This wasn't the man from the alley. That version had been ruthless, cold, chaotic. This man was poised, beautiful, terrifying. A predator in a perfectly tailored three-piece suit, with hair dark as sin and eyes that gleamed silver like a blade in moonlight. "Smell like broken bonds," he said simply. "For mate rejected you." She stiffened. "How do you know that?" "Son, I can feel it." His eyes narrowed. "And the hollowness, the fractured energy. You're walking around with your soul bleeding out of your chest, and nobody in this miserable city knows what to do with you. But I do." He leaned forward, lacing his fingers beneath his chin. "Oh, you need protection." "And I can protect myself." "Is that what you were doing behind the dumpster last night?" Her face flushed. Shame. Fury. "I'm offering you a deal," Lucien said, voice smooth but lethal. "And not pity. Said I didn't ask for a deal. So came anyway." She went silent. "You want work?" he continued. "And I can give you a job. You want power? I can show you how to get it. You want to forget him?" A pause. "I'll make sure he never forgets you." Her heart thudded hard against her ribs. "And what would I have to do?" she asked quietly. Lucien leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "And you'll start as my assistant." Rhea frowned. "You want me to get your coffee?" "I want you to watch people, listen, report, be my ears where others cannot go. In return, I'll give you shelter, a salary, access to weapons, and protection under the Blackthorne name. You'll be untouchable." She hesitated. It sounded too easy. It wasn't. "When there will be rules," he said sharply, "and do not lie to me. You do not spy on me. You do not disobey orders, even if they make you uncomfortable. If I say run, you run. If I say kill, said not an assassin." She said stiffly. "You will be," he said calmly. "Eventually." Silence stretched between them. Oh, I need time," she murmured. You don't have it." And he stood then, so tall she felt dwarfed by his presence. He crossed the room with slow, deliberate steps and stood just inches from her. "I've seen wolves like you before. Thrown away, starved. You think surviving is enough, but it isn't. Not here, not anymore." His voice dropped, dark and velvety. "You will either rise beside me, or you will rot like the rest." Her heart hammered. And then, without warning, he turned and strode away, signaling to someone in the hallway. A tall woman with slick black hair and crimson lips entered. "Escort Miss Arden to her new quarters," he said. "Quarters?" Rhea repeated, stunned. Lucien didn't even glance at her. You start tonight." That evening, Rhea stood on the balcony of a penthouse suite 30 floors above the city. Clean, warm, fed. She was still Rhea Arden. But the girl who had stood weeping beneath the trees of the silver pine forest was gone, and something else was beginning to take her place. The penthouse was silent. Too silent. Rhea stood barefoot on the marble floor, staring at the reflection of city lights that flickered across the glass balcony doors. She couldn't sleep, not with that man's voice still echoing in her skull. "You will either rise beside me, or rot like the rest." The words were not a threat. They were a sentence, like a judge slamming the gavel, and somehow she'd willingly walked into the courtroom. She padded across the room to the bathroom and stared at her reflection. She still didn't recognize herself. The soft cotton robe someone had folded on her bed was now draped over her body. Her hair was clean and combed for the first time in weeks. A small silver bite mark on her neck, the remnants of her rejection, still pulsed faintly. A scar that didn't heal, no matter how much soap she scrubbed or how many hot showers she took. She brushed a fingertip over it. That was where her mate, Kyle, had kissed her before he whispered, "I don't want you." That was where his teeth had sunk into her skin just long enough to mark her, to bind her, then tear the bond away. She remembered the way he looked at her afterward. Like garbage. She should hate him. She did, but hate was like a storm cloud always 2 inches above her shoulders, ready to pour, ready to crush, but never quite falling. And now, Lucien. She didn't understand him, what he wanted, why he offered her a second chance when he clearly had no patience for weakness. Why someone like him, a Mafia king, a cold-blooded alpha with more scars than smiles, had seen her behind that dumpster and made a decision. He could have walked away, but he didn't. And now she was here. The next morning, the sharp click of heels announced the arrival of Celeste, the crimson-lipped assistant who had escorted Rhea to the penthouse. She walked like a predator in Prada and smelled like rose petals laced with venom. "Follow me," she said without a smile. Rhea didn't ask where they were going. They took an elevator to the underground levels of Blackthorne Tower. As they descended, the lights grew dimmer, the air colder. The walls were now dark steel instead of glass, and faint growls could be heard from behind reinforced doors. "What is this place?" Rhea asked, hugging herself. Celeste smirked. "Sis is where Lucien keeps secrets." The elevator dinged, and the doors slid open to reveal a space that looked like a private military base, disguised as a luxury dungeon. Concrete floors, steel weapon racks, long tables cluttered with files, surveillance monitors, scent analysis scanners. Everything organized, everything cold. And at the center stood him. Lucien Blackthorne, wearing a black shirt rolled at the sleeves, revealing strong, inked forearms. A black ring on his right hand. His eyes met hers instantly. He had been waiting. "And you're late," he said simply. Celeste raised a brow. "She was on time." "Since she's late," he repeated, locking eyes with Rhea. "And because in this world, 5 minutes early is already too damn slow." Rhea stiffened. "I didn't know." "And you know now." Then he tossed something at her. She caught it. Heavy, cold, a blade. "Take it up properly," Lucien said. "You're not holding a toy, that's woven silver. Even a scratch from it could paralyze an alpha for an hour." Rhea blinked but obeyed. Her fingers gripped the hilt. She adjusted her stance. He watched her. Not like a man, not like a teacher, like a beast waiting to see if its prey would bare its own teeth. "Why do you want to survive?" he asked. "What? So you heard me." "And I don't want to die." "And that's not the same thing," he said, circling her. Not dying is about fear. Surviving is about power, about what you're willing to do to keep breathing." He stopped in front of her. "And you? What would you do?" Rhea clenched her jaw. "Anything." "Quite good," he murmured, gaze dark. "It then starts swinging." The next 3 hours were torture. He didn't hold back. Lucien trained her himself, not Celeste, not one of his elite guards. Him. Every movement, every block, every strike was designed to teach her pain. Discipline, humiliation, but also how to get back up. By the end, Rhea's arms trembled from exhaustion. Her shirt clung to her body with sweat, and her knees felt like broken hinges. Her hand was bleeding. She'd nicked herself with the blade during a stumble. She collapsed on the mat. Lucien stared down at her. "To dead again." "And not dead," she panted. He tossed her a towel. "And you would be if this was a real fight. But you're learning." Celeste reappeared from the shadows with a protein drink. "Drink," Lucien commanded. Rhea drank. It tasted like ash and strawberries. Later that night she wasn't ready to see him again. But he summoned her anyway. The top floor. His private residence. She was ushered in by a silent butler who opened massive oak doors into a living space that looked like it had been carved from midnight. Bookshelves stretching 2 stories high. A fireplace filled with real flame. Black leather sofas. A grand piano, untouched. A chessboard with pieces mid-game, waiting for no one. Lucien stood near the windows with a glass of whiskey. No tie. His shirt partially unbuttoned. She hesitated in the doorway. "And you look like a ghost," he said without turning. "And see, I feel like one. So don't keep ghosts in my house." She stepped in. "And you didn't answer me," he said. "About what?" "Sent why you want to survive." "And told you, no." He turned then, and something flickered in his gaze. Not pity, not anger, something tortured. "You don't want to survive," he said, approaching her slowly. "And you want to be remembered." Her breath caught. "Don't you?" Rhea's mouth opened. No words came. Lucien was in front of her now, inches away, looking down at her like she was a riddle he couldn't solve, and it was driving him mad. He reached out, just once, and brushed a thumb over the faint scar on her neck. The rejection mark. "I could erase this," he said softly. Her breath hitched. "I could mark you instead. Make you mine. Your mate would smell me on your skin and wither from jealousy. I could give you that." Rhea's lips parted. Lucien's hand fell away. "But I won't," he said coldly, "because that would make me just like him. And I'm not." He walked away. She stood frozen, trembling, wounded, and burning. That night she dreamt of wolves, running across rooftops, through cities soaked in blood and moonlight, and behind them all, a pair of silver eyes watched her. Always watching. The club was electric, the kind of place where secrets slid between bass drops and every smile had a hidden blade. It was nestled beneath the facade of an old opera house, one of the many safe houses belonging to the Iron Fang Syndicate, a rival werewolf mafia led by a brutal rogue alpha named Cairo Vale. Lucien had sent her here with one objective: get close to Cairo's lieutenant, Riker Voss, a sleazy, dangerous beta known for his taste in women, whiskey, and weapons. Rhea had never worn heels so tall in her life, or a dress so tight. The black silk clung to her like liquid ink, slinking along her curves. The plunging neckline dipped too low, the back left bare. She felt naked, vulnerable, exposed, but she didn't complain, because Lucien's voice from the briefing still rang in her skull. "Monday won't take you seriously unless they want to undress you. It's disgusting. But use it. Make them look at you, then make them bleed." She could still feel the weight of his stare when he'd said that, as if he wanted to be the first to undress her, and the last. But then he'd walked away. The club known as Red Howl pulsed like a heartbeat underground. Wolves brushed past her, some fully human, others with their eyes glowing faintly, skin humming with suppressed power. Most of them were shirtless or dressed in expensive torn leather, tattoos of runes curling around necks and wrists. No one noticed her at first. Then Riker Voss did. He was seated in a private booth, his arm draped over the back of the velvet lounge like he owned it. His hair was a messy blonde, and his smile was sharp and amused the second his gaze landed on her. "Oh, damn," he murmured as she approached. "Did the moon send you?" Rhea lowered her lashes and gave a shy smile. Fake. She'd practiced it in the mirror until it no longer felt like a lie. "Mind if I sit?" she asked, her voice sugar-laced. He smirked. "And I'd be offended if you didn't." She slid into the seat beside him. He smelled like whiskey, pine, and blood, just as Lucien had warned. Meanwhile, in Blackthorne Tower, Lucien's jaw was locked. He stood in the surveillance room, a glass of bourbon untouched in his hand, as the live feed from the camera embedded in Rhea's necklace flickered across the screens. She looked stunning. More than stunning. She looked like sin, gift wrapped in silk, and she was smiling at him. At Riker fucking Voss. Lucien hated this part. Not because she was in danger. No, Rhea had already begun to show her mettle. She could survive this. She could slither her way into a killer's den and leave with her head held high. No. What made Lucien grind his teeth was how Riker looked at her. How his eyes slid down her body like she was dessert. How he leaned in too close. And how Rhea didn't flinch. She was playing her role perfectly. Too perfectly. His wolf didn't like it. Not at all. Riker leaned closer. His fingers brushed Rhea's bare thigh. She tensed, but didn't recoil. "You're not from around here," he murmured. She offered a coy shrug. "Does that matter?" He grinned. "Not at all." He waved for another drink and offered her one, eyes lingering on the dip of her collarbone. She took it, sipped, watched him, laughed at his terrible joke, listened as he talked about business, about the dechipment, arriving in 2 nights and the meeting with an unnamed investor. Exactly what Lucien needed. Just a little more. Then Riker's hand slid up, too high. He leaned in and whispered, "And you taste as expensive as you look." Rhea's heart pounded. His lips were about to graze her cheek. Crash. The club doors slammed open. The music screeched to a halt. All eyes turned. Lucien Blackthorne stood in the doorway, black suit immaculate, eyes glowing silver. A hush fell over the room. Even Cairo Vale's men knew better than to mess with the alpha of the Blackthorne syndicate, especially when he looked murderous. Riker stood instantly on guard. "Lucien, didn't think this was your scene." Lucien's voice was low, deadly, and it wasn't. He walked straight toward them, each step like thunder against the floor. Wolves instinctively parted. He reached the booth and looked straight at Rhea. "Get up," he said, voice flat. She blinked. "Foot, now." Riker narrowed his eyes. "She's with me." Lucien didn't even spare him a glance. "And touch her again," he said softly, "and I'll break your spine and feed it to your alpha." Riker's smile vanished. Lucien extended a hand. Rhea hesitated, not out of fear, but because of the heat in his eyes. He wasn't here on business. He wasn't even here for her mission. He was jealous. And for some unfathomable reason, that lit a fire in her chest. She placed her hand in his. He pulled her up, too fast, too close, and wrapped his coat around her shoulders. Then he turned to Riker, who still hadn't moved. "She's not your prey," Lucien said. She's mine." The car was silent. Lucien hadn't said a word since they left. Rhea finally broke. "And I had it under control." He gripped the wheel tighter. "No, you didn't. And I was doing exactly what you asked. And he touched you. And?" "That was the point," he growled, low and deep, like a wolf pacing behind a steel wall. "And I didn't like it," he said. Rhea turned to him. "Why?" Silence. "Why does it bother you when someone touches me, Lucien?" He didn't answer. She leaned in, voice low. "And you said you weren't going to mark me, said you weren't like him. But you're acting like—" He slammed the brakes. The car skidded to a halt at the side of the road. He turned to her, eyes blazing, chest rising like a man at war with himself. "And not your mate, Rhea. Then why are you acting like one?" He didn't answer, didn't speak, just reached out. And with aching gentleness he brushed her hair back from her face. "I don't know what the hell I am with you," he whispered. Then got out of the car, slamming the door behind him, leaving her breathless and burning. Alone. Lucien didn't come back to the car. Not for minutes, not for hours. He let her sit there in silence, his coat wrapped tightly around her, his scent clinging to every thread like it belonged on her skin. Like he belonged. Rhea didn't chase after him, didn't cry. She just leaned her head against the cool window and closed her eyes, letting the quiet suffocate her questions. "And I don't know what the hell I am with you." Those words haunted her, because they sounded like a confession wrapped in fear. Back a Blackthorne Tower, Lucien stood on the rooftop balcony, hands gripping the iron railing so tightly his knuckles cracked. The night wind sliced through his shirt. He welcomed the cold, needed it. Because inside his chest, heat, wild, dangerous, uncontrolled. The wolf in him, the one he'd spent years taming with power, strategy, and ice-cold cruelty, was howling. Rhea. The curve of her throat when she tilted her head in curiosity, the fire in her voice when she challenged him, the terror in her eyes the first night he found her. The bruises Kyle left on her skin still burned in his memory like brands. Lucien wasn't a savior, he was an executioner, and yet the thought of Riker's filthy hands on her made him want to burn the world. He didn't want to want her, but gods he did, not just with lust, but with something far more dangerous. Possession. The next morning Rhea woke in a guest suite at the tower. Lucien hadn't said a word when he came back to the car. He just drove her in silence and gestured for one of his staff to show her to a room. His room was on the top floor. This one was 2 levels beneath, still luxurious, but not intimate. A message had been slipped under her door, training. 10 a.m. sharp. You're late, you run, you bleed, you fight through it. Welcome to the real world, Rhea. Lucien. The space was massive, padded floors, reinforced walls, weapons neatly lined along racks. 3 other wolves were already there, 2 men and a woman. They looked like soldiers, wolves in human skin, their eyes sharp and unreadable. Lucien wasn't there, but his second in command was. Silas, tall, merciless, with storm-colored eyes and a voice like gravel. He circled her like a hawk. You're the girl the boss went to war for, huh? Rhea didn't answer, and let's see if you're worth the bruises. The next hour was hell. Silas didn't hold back. He tossed her onto the mat, made her block punches that came too fast, too hard, made her repeat movements until her muscles screamed. Keep your damn guard up, girl. Don't flinch. Flinching gets you killed. Blood, sweat, more blood. Rhea's lips split, her rib throbbed, her palms were torn from the floor. But she didn't stop. Not once. Even when Silas grabbed her by the collar and slammed her against the wall, pinning her with one hand. What would you do right now? He growled. Your enemy has you. You're weak. You're bleeding. What? Do? Rhea didn't blink. She headbutted him. Hard. Silas staggered back, blinking. Then laughed. You've got teeth, he said. Lucien's gonna love that. Later that night, Lucien watched her from the security room. Saw the way she limped out of training but refused help. Saw how she barely touched her food at dinner. Saw her wander onto the rooftop at midnight, his rooftop. She didn't notice him standing in the shadows. She was facing the city skyline, the wind playing with her hair. Her arms were wrapped around herself, barefoot, vulnerable. Lucien should have gone back inside, but something about her silence pulled him. He stepped forward. "Sir, ribs still aching?" he asked quietly. She didn't turn. "Which one of your men told you?" He paused. Didn't need to ask. She finally turned to him. "You watched me? Always?" Her eyes narrowed. "Why?" He didn't answer. Didn't need to. He stepped closer. She didn't back away. The space between them vibrated with tension. Not just sexual, something deeper. A tether neither wanted to name. "Bunyu told me not to get attached," she whispered. "And did. Pin, but you did anyway." Silence. The wind howled around them. Lucien's jaw clenched. "I was never supposed to care. About anyone. That's how I survived. That's how I built all this. And now?" He stared at her. "And you make me remember what it feels like to be alive. And I hate it." Before she could respond, he turned to go. But her voice stopped him cold. "I used to dream about my mate," she said softly. "And about the way he'd protect me, love me, choose me." Lucien didn't move. "And he rejected me." Her voice cracked slightly. "And now I don't know how to believe anyone can choose me for the right reasons." A pause. Then Lucien turned back, walked toward her, stopped only inches away, and cupped her bruised face with a tenderness that startled them both. "So you want honesty?" he whispered. Her breath caught. "And I didn't mark you because I was afraid you'd become my weakness. But now I realize." He brushed a thumb over her lip. "Oh, you already are." He leaned in. Didn't kiss her. Didn't touch her again. Just let the words hang in the air like lightning ready to strike. Then left her breathless and trembling beneath the stars. The past is never really dead. It doesn't lie quietly in a coffin. It lingers in the shadows, wrapped in smoke and blood and memory. And tonight, Rhea was about to see that Lucien Blackthorne, for all his power, was a man built from ruins. She wasn't supposed to be there. The wing was off limits. Lucien's orders were clear: never go down the east hallway. Stay away from the last door on the left. But curiosity was louder than her fear. Rhea's fingers hovered over the cold iron doorknob. Her heart pounded. The handle turned with a creak, and behind the door she found dust, silence, and a graveyard of memories. The room was unlike the rest of Blackthorne Tower. No marble, no gleaming glass, no weapons lined on the walls. Instead, it was filled with paintings. Dozens of them, canvases large and small, some slashed violently down the middle, others untouched as if frozen in time, charcoal sketches scattered across a wooden table, oil-stained rags, an unfinished portrait of a woman with sharp cheekbones, laughter in her eyes, and a wolf tattoo across her collarbone, and in the center of it all, a single leather chair, facing the window. Occupied. Lucien sat there, shirt sleeves rolled up, a drink in his hand, a lit cigarette between two fingers. Smoke curled around him like a crown of ash. "He didn't turn and told you not to come here." Rhea stepped into the room anyway, the floorboards creaking beneath her bare feet. "And 'tis is yours," she whispered. "And you're an artist." He laughed, bitter. And then she moved toward one of the torn canvases. And you painted her. His voice was low, rough. Said her name was Elle. Rhea didn't ask. She waited. Lucien stood. The smoke curled and vanished. She was my Luna, my mate, before I was Alpha, before the Mafia, before the blood. Rhea's breath caught. He walked toward the window, and for the first time she saw it. The grief. It was carved into his posture, stitched into his voice, embedded in the scars he never talked about. She died. Lucien shook his head. No, worse. A pause. A breath. Then, she betrayed me. 5 years ago. Flashback, the memory hit like gunfire. Lucien, younger, wilder. Not yet an alpha, not yet the shadowy figure of power the world feared. Elle was fire, a rogue alpha's daughter with moon-pale hair and a mouth that knew only rebellion. She had a wolf's laugh and a blade hidden in her boot. Lucien fell for her like lightning, fast, bright, and ruinous. They built dreams together, sketched them in this room, kissed under candlelight while planning a peaceful pack without politics or bloodlines. Then came the coup. Lucien's father was murdered, the Blackthorne name thrown into chaos, and Elle sold him out. To the very people who spilled his father's blood. For power, for survival, for reasons she never explained. Lucien survived. Barely. He took the throne soaked in his own blood and never looked back. Present day, and I haven't painted since, Lucien muttered. My hands stopped knowing how. Rhea stared at the room. You kept it all. He turned to her, a sad smile tugging at his mouth, and I kept it to remember what happens when I love blindly. Silence stretched between them, soft and aching. Then Rhea said something that made his breath still, and not her. Lucien's eyes locked onto hers. And won't betray you, she whispered. And even if you never mark me, even if you never let yourself fall. He didn't speak, just walked to her, slow, measured steps. He reached for her hand and placed it on his chest. She could feel it, the thrum of his heartbeat, strong, chaotic. Feel that? He murmured. She nodded. It only does that around you. That night, the moon hung low like an omen. Lucien sat in the war room hours later, flanked by Silas and 2 other lieutenants. The air was thick with tension. Then Silas spoke. Went to he intercepted a package. He dropped it on the table. A black box. Lucien opened it. Inside was a severed wolf ear, still dripping, and beneath it, a note, bring her back, or every person under your roof dies screaming. You have 3 days, Kyle. Lucien's jaw clenched. The rage in his bones simmered to the surface. Rhea's ex. Her so-called mate. He was back, and he wasn't bluffing. Rhea woke up gasping. Sweat drenched her skin. Her sheets were tangled, the room cold despite the heat that clung to her body. She dreamed of chains, of Kyle's claws, of the night she escaped, running barefoot through the dark forest, bleeding, terrified, rejected. Of his promise, I'll find you. You're mine, Rhea. You'll always be mine. The knock on the door was soft but urgent. Lucien entered without waiting. I need to talk to you, he said. Now. Her voice shook. He's coming, isn't he? Lucien nodded once. He sent a message. He wants you back. She stood, spine straight despite the fear in her eyes. Then let him come. Lucien watched her. You're not afraid? Sin, I am, she admitted. But I won't run this time. Lucien stepped closer. His voice dropped. If he lays a single finger on you. Rhea looked up. You'll kill him? Lucien's eyes darkened. No, he said, and I'll ruin him. The moon had barely set when the tower began to tremble. Not from earthquakes, not from any human war, but from wolves. The kind bred for blood, trained to hunt without mercy, and paid to die if it meant fulfilling an order from the Alpha of the South. Kyle. And Kyle had made his first move. 72 hours before the deadline, Lucien called a midnight meeting with his lieutenants. Rhea, now fully inducted into Blackthorne Tower's inner circle, sat at the far end of the obsidian table. The lights above them buzzed dimly, casting long shadows over faces carved from war. Kyle's wolves were spotted at the outer edge of District 9, Silas said, tossing a manila file across the table. Two men torn apart. One woman unrecognizable. They left her alive long enough to whisper who sent them. Rhea's stomach twisted. Lucien's face was stone. He wants a war. And he'll get one, Silas growled, but Lucien didn't answer. He turned to Rhea. He's not here for land or power. He wants you. She straightened in her chair. Then I'm not running. I'm not hiding. Lucien studied her, eyes unreadable. She'll do as I say, he said, voice quiet but absolute. And lost before. I don't intend to lose again. Rhea stood up slowly. And don't treat me like a pawn. The entire room went silent. Silas gave a low whistle. Lucien's jaw twitched. Then, to everyone's surprise, his lips curved slightly. Fine. Then be a queen. The gala had already been planned, a way to show strength, control, and wealth to the 5 surrounding syndicates. Canceling it now would be seen as a sign of weakness, so Lucien didn't cancel it. Instead, he turned it into a trap, and Kyle's spies will be there, he told Rhea as she stepped into the dressing room lined with gowns more expensive than cars. And they'll expect you to be hidden. We'll do the opposite. So you want me to be bait? She asked. No, he said. I want you to be fire. Lucien's people tailored it for her. A gown of blood-red silk that clung to her like a second skin. It shimmered with embedded crystals and dipped scandalously low at the back, revealing pale skin and the hint of the scar Kyle once gave her. Her hair was swept into an elegant chignon, and her lips were painted a deep, dangerous crimson. Rhea had never looked so lethal, or so alive. She descended the staircase into the grand ballroom, and all heads turned. The syndicate leaders, Alpha Rutger of the East, Madame Shira of the North, and 2 others, whispered behind their jeweled masks. Lucien was waiting at the bottom, in a midnight black suit that did sinful things to his silhouette. He offered her his arm, voice smooth. Ready to begin the performance? She looped her fingers through his. I'll let them watch me burn. It began with the violins, a sharp, high-pitched squeal that was just a note off, enough to make Rhea flinch. Then the chandeliers went out, and screams followed. 3 masked figures dropped from the upper balconies, dressed in black combat suits, blades flashing in the dark. Silas was on them before they could breathe. A blur of muscle and teeth, his wolf half manifested. Lucien shoved Rhea behind him and drew a blade from inside his jacket, gleaming obsidian edged in silver. The ballroom descended into chaos. One assassin lunged for Rhea. She didn't wait. She ducked, pivoted, grabbed a decorative spear from the display beside her and drove it into his gut. The man staggered, blood spurting from his mouth. She kicked him in the throat. He didn't rise again. Lucien turned just in time to see her wipe blood from her cheek, breathing hard. Their eyes met across the ruined ballroom. Something passed between them. Not desire, not fear, but respect. An hour later, the bodies were cleared. Guests escorted. The floor scrubbed. Rhea stood barefoot at the edge of the balcony, watching the sunrise creep across the sky, blood still on her hands. Lucien approached from behind. And you did well. She turned. That wasn't the real attack, was it? He shook his head. No. That was a message. To you? He took a long moment to answer. To us. She looked at him. And you still think I'm your weakness? Lucien stepped closer, cupping her chin, his voice a low promise. No, he whispered. You're my war. And when he kissed her, it wasn't gentle, it was claiming. His mouth moved over hers like he was writing a vow into her skin. When they broke apart, her breath was ragged. I thought you'd never let yourself feel anything again. Lucien's eyes darkened. And didn't. Until you. Across the city, in an abandoned cathedral-turned-battle bunker, Kyle watched the footage of the failed attack. His lieutenant shifted nervously beside him. Oh, she's not scared of you anymore. Kyle's jaw cracked. And I don't want her scared. He dragged a knife down the map of the city, slicing through Blackthorne Tower. And Tower, aim on her mine. He turned to his men. It get me her sister. The taste of war always came before the war itself, like metal on the tongue, like blood in the air, like a chill that settled under the skin and whispered, someone's coming for what you love. Rhea didn't know she still had something left to lose, until Kyle stole her sister. A call from hell. The call came just before dawn. Lucien was in the strategy room, shirtless, fresh from sparring, sweat still clinging to his skin. He looked feral, golden eyes wild, when Silas rushed in holding a vibrating burner phone. "It's him." Lucien caught the phone mid-ring. "What?" Kyle's voice was smooth, cruel, polished like a blade honed over fire. Since she screamed, "You know." When I took her, Lucien didn't blink. "What do you want?" A chuckle. "I already told you, my mate, the one who forgot who she belongs to." Lucien clenched the phone so hard the casing cracked. "But I'm not unreasonable," Kyle went on. "You want her sister back? Then bring Rhea to the White Veil border. No weapons, no guards, just her. And you, one car. If I see a drone above my trees, I start cutting her fingers off." The line went dead. Lucien lowered the phone slowly. Then, in a voice quieter than death, he said, "Oh, get the car." Rhea's knees buckled when she heard. Sophia? You're sure it was her?" Silas nodded grimly. A deed matched. Kyle must have found her hiding up north. She'd been living under a fake surname, teaching kids at a rogue school. Rhea's chest caved in. "She thought I was dead. I thought she was." Lucien's hand was suddenly at her back, grounding her, his voice low and fierce. "How we'll get her back." Her eyes flicked up to him. "He'll kill you, if you come with me." "He'll try," Lucien murmured. "But why?" she whispered. "Why my sister?" Silas glanced away. He already knew. Lucien answered instead. "And because he knows it's the only thing left that could break you." They took one car, a sleek matte black Maybach, its windows bulletproof, its engine a purr of restrained violence. Lucien drove. Rhea sat beside him, dressed in black jeans and a leather jacket, no makeup, no pretense, just fury in her eyes and guilt in her chest. "Oh, you're too quiet," he said after an hour of silence. "And I'm remembering things," she replied. "And about Kyle?" She nodded. "And about the girl I used to be, the girl who loved him because he made me feel wanted, then hated herself for not seeing the monster underneath." Lucien's hands tightened on the wheel. "And you're not that girl anymore." "And I still remember her screams." Lucien turned his head, voice raw. "I'll pay." "I don't want revenge," she said. "I want her safe. That's all." His voice dropped to a whisper. "And if he makes you choose?" She didn't hesitate. "And choose her." Lucien went still, but he said nothing. White Veil sat at the edge of disputed territory, a forest that belonged to no alpha, governed by no law. Once sacred land, it had been defiled by blood rituals and unspoken pacts. Now it was Kyle's kingdom. They drove until the trees grew too thick, then walked. Lucien carried a hidden blade strapped beneath his arm. Rhea carried only a single vial, a nerve agent disguised as perfume. Just in case, when they reached the clearing, a wall of pine split open like a mouth yawning. Kyle was waiting, tall, dressed in bone-white tactical gear. His eyes burned amber. His smile was a demon's promise. "Sister Rhea," he said, arms wide. "For came." Rhea didn't flinch. "Where is she?" Kyle tilted his head. "You don't want a hug?" "Where is she?" He turned, and then she saw her. Sophia, tied to a wooden post, bruised, mouth gagged, her wolf eyes wide with terror. Rhea surged forward. Lucien caught her arm. Kyle raised a hand. Let her go. This is a reunion, not an execution." And two guards stepped forward and cut the ropes. Sophia stumbled toward her sister, fell into her arms, weeping. "And not, Rhea, I thought you were—" "Say no," Rhea whispered, holding her like a lifeline. "And no." Kyle watched them with a slow smile. Then his gaze cut to Lucien. "Now it's your turn." Lucien stepped forward. "So have what you wanted. Let us leave." Kyle's smile widened. "And you really think I came all this way just to give her back?" Lucien's eyes narrowed. "What do you want?" Kyle lifted a finger and pointed to Rhea. "I want her to choose, her alpha or her past." Rhea blinked. "What are you talking about?" Kyle pulled something from his jacket, a bloodied journal. "And I found this in Sophia's home, your mother's. You should read the last page." He tossed it at her feet. Rhea hesitated, then picked it up. She flipped to the back, heart thudding. The final words, scrawled in trembling ink. "Rhea's true mate is not KL. She was never his. She was promised to another. We hid her to protect her, but Kyle found us. He forced the bond. It was never real." Her hands shook. I'm not his?" Lucien moved to her side, and never were. Kyle's voice turned cold. "She was mine the moment she bled for me." Lucien didn't wait. He lunged. A blur of claws, smoke, and rage. The two alphas collided mid-air, a crash of titans. Trees splintered. The ground shook. Sophia screamed. Rhea turned, shoved her sister behind a fallen log, and screamed, "Run!" But Sophia didn't run. She pulled something from her waistband, a dagger, and lunged at Rhea. Rhea froze. "What are you?" The blade sank deep into her shoulder. Sophia's voice twisted. "I told him where you were. I made him promise to let me live. That's all I wanted." Rhea staggered back. "I'm your sister." "Oh no," Sophia hissed. "Saying I was. Until you became his obsession. Until your name ruined our family." She raised the blade again. But this time Rhea was faster. With a savage cry, she disarmed her and struck her across the face. Sophia hit the ground and didn't move. Lucien was still fighting Kyle, blood flying, claws bared. Rhea turned, grabbed the gun from Kyle's holster, and fired. The forest went still. Kyle fell to his knees, blood pouring from the bullet wound in his stomach. Lucien, panting, eyes wild, looked at Rhea. She stood tall, blood staining her sleeve, eyes colder than winter. "And he won't take me again," she said. Lucien stared at her, and knew then, with absolute certainty. She was no longer a survivor. She was a queen. His queen. Silence fell over the forest like a heavy fog once Kyle's body hit the ground. For a heartbeat, everything was still. No rustling leaves, no wind, not even birdsong. It was as if the entire world held its breath. Rhea stood with the smoking gun still clutched in her trembling hand, blood soaking through the fabric of her jacket where her sister's blade had cut deep. Her heart thundered in her chest, and her breath came in shallow, shocked gasps. Lucien stared at her, panting, his chest rising and falling as blood dripped from a long gash across his ribs. His golden eyes were locked on her, wild, disbelieving, and something else, something deeper, something dangerous. He took a step forward, not toward Kyle, who groaned and writhed in the dirt, but toward her. His gaze didn't waver. "Ange, you shot him," he said quietly, not as a question, but as a recognition of who she was, who she had become. Rhea dropped the gun. It clattered to the forest floor, and the noise jolted her back to the present. Her knees gave out a second later. She dropped too, landing hard on her side, wincing as pain lanced through her injured shoulder. Lucien caught her before she could hit the ground fully. His arms wrapped around her, and for a moment, Rhea let herself lean into him. Let herself feel his warmth, his steadiness, his presence. Sophia's unconscious form lay several feet away, her betrayal still echoing in Rhea's ears like a cruel joke. The same sister who had braided her hair before school, who had snuck her pieces of chocolate under the dinner table, who had once fought off 3 boys at school just for calling Rhea a mutt, had driven a blade into her flesh. Rhea couldn't stop the tears that welled up. But she didn't sob. No, these weren't tears of sorrow. They were the silent tears of someone who had finally seen the truth and could no longer hide from it. "As she sold me," Rhea whispered. "She wanted him to take me. Again." Lucien's arms tightened around her. "And you stopped her. You stopped all of it." But Rhea didn't feel victorious. She felt hollow, her hand pressed against her shoulder, the warmth of her blood soaking through her fingers. Lucien glanced down and growled low in his throat, "We need to get you out of here. Now." Without waiting for a reply, he scooped her into his arms with the kind of ease that made her dizzy. As he carried her away from the clearing, his voice dropped to a murmur, meant only for her. "And you saved yourself. But from now on, Rhea, you don't have to do it alone." They didn't speak on the drive back. Rhea sat slumped against the leather seat, wrapped in Lucien's oversized coat, the pain from her wound dulling into a low throb. Silas drove, eyes flicking nervously between the road and the rearview mirror. Every now and then his gaze would linger on Rhea, as if trying to figure out how she'd gone from a trembling Omega to the woman who had just taken down her former mate and survived a betrayal that would have broken anyone else. Back at the estate, the world returned to motion all at once. Guards rushed out as the car pulled into the underground garage. The mansion doors opened. Healers ran forward, and Rhea was whisked into a medical suite before she could protest. Lucien stayed outside, pacing like a caged predator. She could see him through the glass window in the door, shirtless, bloody. His fists clenched, his eyes never leaving her. The healer was a woman with a soft voice and a no-nonsense attitude. "Und you're lucky," she said as she cleaned the wound. "Few inches lower and it would have pierced your lung." Rhea stared at the ceiling, her voice dull. "And it was my sister." The healer's hands paused. "Oh no." Rhea turned her head. "Do you think people are born broken, or do they become that way?" The woman didn't answer for a long time. Then, gently, "Some of us are forged in fire. Others let the fire consume them." By nightfall, Sophia was locked in one of the estate's secure holding cells under 24-hour guard. She had regained consciousness briefly, only to spit at Rhea and scream obscenities until sedated again. Rhea watched her through the glass, watched her sister thrash, curse, weep. And yet, the betrayal still felt fresh, sharp, bleeding. Lucien appeared beside her. He didn't say anything for a long time, just stood there, his presence enough to anchor her. "She'll stand trial," he said finally. "But it's your choice. What happens next is up to you." Rhea looked at him. She was my only family. Lucien shook his head, eyes fierce. "Since she stopped being that the moment she offered you to him like a bargaining chip." Rhea swallowed. "And if I forgive her?" His jaw clenched. "Then I'll protect her. For you, even if she doesn't deserve it." Rhea turned away from the glass. "And you're the only one who's ever said that to me." Lucien's hand brushed against hers. "And because I mean it." Later that night, Rhea couldn't sleep. The events of the day haunted her every time she closed her eyes. So she walked. Barefoot, wearing only a long black shirt and one of Lucien's jackets, she wandered the halls until she found herself outside his room. The door was ajar. He was on the balcony, shirtless, smoking a cigar, staring at the stars like they held answers he could never reach. She stepped into the room silently, but he felt her anyway. Turned, met her gaze. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. Rhea shook her head. "Nightmares." "Want a distraction?" he asked. "Or company?" She hesitated, then stepped onto the balcony. The wind was cool, the air clean. Lucien handed her the cigar. She took a drag, coughed once, then laughed. He grinned. "Not used to it." "And not used to feeling free," she corrected. Lucien turned fully toward her. His eyes searched hers. You read the journal. You saw what your mother wrote." Rhea nodded. "And not Kael's. Never was." "Hench means," Lucien said, voice low, "you're unmated." Rhea looked up at him, heart beginning to race. "I suppose I am. And yet, Lucien said, stepping closer. "You haven't asked me to mark you." Rhea held his gaze. "Would you, if you asked?" He reached up, brushed her hair back, his fingers grazing the side of her neck where the mark would go. "But I need to know you're ready, because once I mark you, you're mine, fully. No turning back. Not for politics, not for war, not for anything." Rhea's breath hitched. "And if I'm not ready?" Lucien's voice softened. "Then I wait, even if it kills me." Rhea reached up. Her hand rested against his chest, where his heart thundered beneath her touch. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not of you. Of losing myself again." "Stay here," Lucien whispered. "Stay, and find yourself with me." Rhea didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned into him, let his scent wash over her, smoke, cedar, something dark and masculine. His arms wrapped around her, strong, steady, warm. And for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of something more than survival. Love, safety, a future, but not yet, not tonight. She pulled back slightly, just enough to look into his eyes. "Not yet," she said softly, "but soon." Lucien nodded. No disappointment in his gaze, only patience and a quiet, burning promise. "I'll wait," he said, "for as long as it takes." The morning after the ambush in the forest dawned gray and cold. Clouds blanketed the sky in endless layers, as if the heavens were mourning something Rhea couldn't quite name. She stood in front of the tall windows in the guest wing, arms wrapped around her body, watching the cold drizzle roll down the glass. Her shoulder was bandaged tightly beneath the soft cream sweater Lucien had sent her, and every now and then a dull ache throbbed through the wound, a physical reminder of betrayal and survival. Below her, the estate buzzed with activity. Men in tailored suits, armed guards, and discreetly dressed wolves moved in and out of sleek black cars parked in the circular driveway. It wasn't just any day. Today, Lucien had summoned the council. It was Rhea's first real taste of the other side of his world, not just the alpha of the Ravaran pack, but the man who wielded his wealth and power like a dagger behind his back. And she was about to walk straight into. At 9 sharp, a soft knock came at her door. It wasn't Lucien, but a woman named Calla, a striking beta with obsidian braids twisted into a crown and golden eyes that mirrored Lucien's. "Bonda Alpha asked me to accompany you to the council hall," she said with a faint smile. They're eager to meet you." There was no malice in her voice, but there was something else. Caution, perhaps. Curiosity. Rhea nodded, following her silently. Her boots made no sound against the marble floors as they weaved through corridors lined with oil paintings, ancient crests, and heavy tapestries. The air smelled of sandalwood and leather, and Rhea couldn't help but notice how much of the estate was designed for intimidation and control. It was like walking into the heart of a lion's den. When they reached the Grand Council Hall, the heavy oak doors were already open. A long rectangular table dominated the space, made of dark ironwood and flanked by 14 seats, 12 for the pack leaders, 1 for Lucien, and a 13th reserved for observers. That seat was hers. All eyes turned toward her as she entered. No one spoke. Lucien rose from his chair at the head of the table, dressed in all black, black button-down shirt, black slacks, black belt with a silver buckle carved in the shape of a wolf's head. He looked every inch the Alpha King. His golden eyes softened when they landed on her. "And you're here?" Rhea met his gaze evenly. "And I said I'd stay." The simple exchange held volumes. Lucien motioned to the empty seat beside his. "Sit with me." There were murmurs at that, low and swift, but they died quickly under the weight of his stare. The councilmen and women were powerful alphas in their own right, rulers of smaller packs, CEOs of empire-sized businesses, even a senator who ran a tech conglomerate in Europe. But here, Lucien ruled. Rhea sat. He placed a protective hand at the back of her chair and leaned in slightly. "If anyone says anything you don't like, say the word." "And she'll throw them out?" she whispered. "And I'll throw them through the window," he said, deadpan. The first 2 hours passed in a storm of information. Reports on rogue sightings in the southern sectors, a border dispute with the Greystone Pack, and increasing pressure from the Human Oversight Committee on supernatural entities. Rhea listened quietly, absorbing names and alliances like a sponge. But it wasn't until the 3rd hour that her name was spoken. A tall woman with hair the color of smoke and sharp violet eyes leaned forward, placing her perfectly manicured hands on the table. "With all due respect, Alpha Ravaran, we need to address the real issue, the girl." Rhea didn't flinch, but Lucien tensed. "She's not just any Omega," the woman continued. "She's Kyle Draven's former mate. The political implications of that alone, and former is the operative word," Lucien cut in coldly. "Yes," another alpha spoke up, an older man with graying temples and an air of calculated calm. "Emont rumors are already spreading. She was rejected, yes, but she carries his scent in her history. That's dangerous. To align yourself with her so publicly." "Since she is under my protection," Lucien said. The woman smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes. "And you've never claimed anyone, Lucien. Not officially. Not like this. It's raising eyebrows. People think you're—" She paused, letting the silence stretch. "Vulnerable." Lucien leaned forward, voice like velvet, lined with steel. "Do you think I'm vulnerable, Lyra?" The woman sat back, smile gone. "So I think power demands alliances, not sentiment." That was when it happened. Calla stepped forward, carrying a silver case. She placed it on the table and opened it, revealing a scroll of parchment stamped in crimson wax and sealed with the insignia of the Solstice Pack. Rhea felt something shift in the air. Lucien didn't touch it. "What is this?" "Unse proposal," Lyra said. From Alpha Cato of Solstice. He offers an alliance. In exchange for your hand." Her eyes flicked to Rhea, "And your distance from her." The silence was deafening. Lucien didn't move, didn't blink. Rhea, however, felt as though the room had cracked open beneath her. She stared at the scroll, an object so small, yet so heavy with meaning. "And he's proposing marriage," she said slowly. "Not marriage," the older man corrected. "A claiming bond. It's more flexible. Symbolic. Strategic." Lyra's gaze returned to Lucien. "He will forgive the debt your father owed, offer you 5,000 acres along the sea, access to weapons, resources, a blood treaty." Lucien stood, his chair scraped back with a sound like thunder. Everyone looked up at him. He picked up the scroll, then he set it ablaze. No hesitation, no fanfare. The parchment curled in flames until all that remained was ash. Lucien's voice was ice. "Tell Alpha Cato I'd rather burn with her than reign without her." And then he turned to Rhea, who hadn't moved, hadn't dared breathe. Their eyes met, and in that moment, it no longer mattered what anyone thought. She felt it in her blood, in her bones. Lucien Ravarin had chosen her, and he had made that choice in front of the entire council. Later that night, Rhea found herself on the roof of the estate, wrapped in a thick cloak, as the stars blinked cold and distant above. She didn't hear Lucien approach, but she felt it. He moved like shadow, like smoke, but his warmth was unmistakable. He sat beside her without speaking. They stared at the night for a while. "You burned a treaty," she said. "And I'd burn a kingdom." I'm not yours yet," she whispered. Lucien looked at her, gaze calm but fierce. "And you've always been mine." She turned to him. Her hand found his. Interlocked fingers, a small act, but thunderous in its intimacy. "And she's scared," she admitted again. "And I know. Inside, I've never been chosen before." Lucien brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles softly. "And you weren't just chosen, Rhea," he murmured. "And you were claimed. By your own fire first, by your strength. I only followed." And for the first time since she'd been rejected, since she'd bled, since she'd clawed her way free of the darkness, Rhea smiled. The next morning arrived not with the peace of dawn, but the pressure of a rising storm. Rhea woke to the deep sound of thunder rolling across the Ravarin estate. The windows trembled faintly in their frames, as the sky outside darkened to a moody bruise of slate and navy. Rain had started to fall in hard vertical streaks, bouncing off the stone balconies and flooding the marble terraces. It was the kind of storm that made the world feel smaller, as if the heavens themselves were closing in. Lucien's bed was empty beside her. Not that she'd expected him to still be there. He rarely stayed long after she fell asleep. Their intimacy hadn't escalated yet into anything more than shared space and heated, lingering looks. But the slow, quiet companionship he offered her at night had become something she couldn't deny needing. She ran her fingers along the smooth fabric of the sheets, still warm. Something had stirred him early. Something urgent. Rhea dressed quickly in one of the sleek black outfits Calla had brought her the day before. A fitted cashmere top, high-waisted pants, and knee-high boots with silver buckles. She threw on a deep forest green cloak and left her room, her footsteps echoing through the quiet hallway. The estate felt different, charged, tense. She passed 3 heavily armed guards on the way to the West Wing, each nodding at her respectfully. A few weeks ago, they would have ignored her. Now they looked at her the way one might regard a volatile artifact, beautiful but dangerous. She found Lucien in the war room, a subterranean chamber beneath the estate lined with monitors, maps, and ancient books. He was standing at the head of the oval table, one hand on the edge, the other pressing a button on a sleek intercom. Calla and 2 other betas flanked him. One of them, Varric, a hawk-eyed former enforcer from the Eastern Territories, was flipping through printed security reports, his face grim. Rhea hesitated at the door. Lucien looked up immediately, and just like that, the coldness in his expression thawed. "Come in," he said, voice rough from lack of sleep. She stepped inside. "What's happened?" she asked, scanning the digital display showing live satellite feeds of several compounds, one of which was actively burning. Lucien exhaled slowly, and Solstice Pack retaliated. Her chest went cold. "How? They targeted one of our southern shipping ports at midnight, firebombed the docks, killed 8 of our workers, and left a message scorched into the concrete." Rhea moved closer, her stomach twisting. "What did it say?" Varric answered, his voice sharp and clipped. "Return the girl, or watch your empire fall." The silence that followed was thick. "When they called me the girl?" Rhea asked, almost laughing at the insult. "Do I not get a name?" Lucien's eyes didn't leave hers. "And she'll have a title soon enough, and they'll choke on it." She looked away, not because she was ashamed, but because something hot and tremulous bubbled inside her. Not fear, fury. Not for herself, but for the people burned in that attack. For the lives taken because someone wanted to use her as leverage. "What are you going to do?" she asked finally. Lucien stepped back and picked up a slim silver remote. A map of the continent flared to life on the central screen. "Tonight," he said, "there's a gala in Vesmond, neutral ground, hosted by the Crescent Council. It's being framed as a peace conference, but we all know it's a political chessboard." "Hento will be there," Calla added. "So will the Dravens," Varric said. Rhea went still. "Kyle?" Lucien didn't react, but she saw his jaw tighten. "And I should go too," she said. All heads turned toward her. Lucien spoke first. "No, Sentia can't shield me forever. And not shielding you. I'm protecting you." "There's a difference?" Lucien crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. "Yes. Protecting you means I'll throw myself into fire for you. Shielding is pretending you don't know how to walk through it." Rhea met his eyes. "Then let me walk beside you." They stared at each other, and something wordless passed between them. Tension, understanding, heat. Calla cleared her throat. "When there's another reason she should come." Lucien didn't like that. "Explain." Calla walked to the table, placed a small velvet box at its center. "Sent, we received this last night. From a seer who works for the Southern Syndicate." Lucien's voice dropped. "We're not entertaining any prophecy." "It's not a prophecy," Calla said firmly. "It's a memory trace, extracted from a relic that once belonged to Rhea's mother." Rhea blinked. "Oh, my mother?" Lucien turned to her, clearly surprised. "You didn't know her?" "But no, she died when I was a baby. That's what I was told." Calla opened the box. Inside was a thin silver chain with a blue teardrop-shaped gem. She lifted it gently. "Put it on." Rhea hesitated, then took it, the cool weight of it startling against her skin. The moment it settled around her neck, warmth bloomed through her chest. Not painful, just ancient. The gem pulsed once, and then a voice whispered in her mind. "And little star, if you find this, it means the wolves are hunting. Trust only the one who stands in fire with bare hands, the one who knows your name not from the wind, but from the blood." Rhea staggered. Lucien caught her. "What did you hear?" he asked, voice sharp. She swallowed. I think my mother left a message for me, about someone she trusted." Lucien helped her sit. His fingers never left her back. Calla sat too, eyes serious. If what the gem says is true, Rhea isn't just someone's rejected mate. She might be the heir to an old bloodline, one powerful enough that others wanted her erased. Or forgotten. Lucien looked stricken, though he masked it quickly. "Well, no more after the gala." Rhea stood up, still dizzy. "And I'm going. I need answers." Lucien looked at her long and hard, then gave a slow nod. "Fine, but you don't leave my side." And she almost smiled. "Side I don't think I could even if I tried." The Vesmond Gala was held in the glass cathedral, a floating structure anchored over the ocean cliffs of Aravel. Shimmering chandeliers floated in mid-air, suspended by invisible threads of magic. The walls were transparent, offering a view of lightning cracking across the Black Sea. The elite of every pack, coven, and criminal syndicate had gathered, draped in silks, wolves in velvet, vamps in onyx. It was opulence built on centuries of blood. Rhea arrived in a gown the color of winter midnight, slit up the side, her hair braided with silver threads. Lucien stood beside her in tailored obsidian, no tie, his hair slicked back just enough to look regal and wild all at once. All eyes turned when they entered. Whispers followed. "But that's her," some ejected one, "since she's not claimed." Yet, Rhea heard every word, and she stood straighter. Then she saw him, Kyle Draven, across the room, in pearl gray, standing beside a woman whose face she didn't recognize but whose posture was pure royalty. His eyes locked with hers. His face changed. He looked like a man haunted by ghosts. Rhea smiled, cool and devastating, then turned her head and gave Lucien her full attention. Shreddy," she murmured. Lucien's hand slid to the small of her back. "Oh, you were made for this," he said. "And let's show them." The gala was a living, breathing thing. Glass chandeliers floated like ghosts above golden tables. The music was sultry and slow, with strings that throbbed like the heartbeat of something ancient. It was the kind of gathering where no one smiled without a dagger behind their back, and every toast was an act of war dressed as celebration. Rhea kept her chin high as she moved through the crowd beside Lucien. Everywhere she looked, she felt stares. Some were curious, others were hungry, but most were dismissive. That didn't surprise her. Being rejected meant weakness in the eyes of their world. She wasn't supposed to be here, wearing silk and silver, commanding the presence of an alpha, but she was, and she wasn't leaving without answers. Lucien's hand never left her lower back as they walked together, parting the crowd like royalty. He hadn't spoken much since their arrival, but his body was tense, wired, his jaw was set. He was watching everyone. She leaned toward him slightly, her voice just above a whisper. "What are you expecting to happen?" He didn't turn his head. "Something ugly. Something quiet. Poison in a glass or a dagger in the dark." "And you brought me here?" His eyes flicked down to hers, dark and full of something that was almost pride. "And you said you wanted to walk beside me. You don't walk beside someone like me unless you understand how dangerous the shadows are." A voice interrupted them before Rhea could respond. Well, you clean up nicely for a Mafia dog." Lucien's expression didn't change as he turned. "And you still talk too much for a second son." Kyle Draven stood in a tailored gray suit, his silver tie fastened with a moonstone. He looked older than Rhea remembered, not in years, but in wear. There were new shadows beneath his eyes, and the cocky smirk he wore didn't quite reach his expressionless gaze. "Rhea," he said softly, turning his attention to her. She didn't flinch, didn't let her voice tremble. "Kale, you look," he faltered. "Beautiful." Lucien's presence beside her sharpened. Rhea tilted her head slightly. "That's funny. You didn't think so when you left me bleeding in the woods." His face changed at that. It was subtle, a flicker of guilt, an ache he tried to hide. "That wasn't my choice." Don't lie," Lucien cut in, voice cold and low. "We both know you didn't just reject her. You made sure everyone else did too." Kyle's mouth pressed into a line. "And you don't know the whole story." "Then I don't need to. I only care about the part where she ended up in my arms, not yours." The air between them shimmered with heat. Rhea could feel eyes turning toward them. It was dangerous, this kind of public animosity. But she didn't stop it. Kyle took a step forward, his voice lower now. "There's more going on here than either of you know. The council." "And I don't give a damn about the council," Lucien growled. "And you should," Kyle snapped. Because someone here tonight wants her dead." Rhea's blood froze. Lucien's expression didn't change, but his arm subtly slid more protectively around Rhea's waist. "What do you know?" Kyle hesitated. "There's a contract. High bounty. Signed in blood, and it was approved by a council member." "To who?" Rhea asked. But Kyle didn't answer. Instead, he looked at her with something like sorrow. "And I tried to protect you, Rhea, back then and now. I didn't reject you because I hated you. I did it because—" "Save it," she cut in sharply. "Whatever excuse you had, you still abandoned me. And now I'm not yours to protect." Lucien took her hand in his. Slow, deliberate. "'Tis mine now." Kyle's face turned to stone, but he stepped back. "I hope you're ready for what's coming," he said quietly. "And because this world isn't kind to queens born of fire and scandal." And then he melted into the crowd. Lucien's grip on her hand was firm but not forceful. Rhea turned to him, her pulse hammering. "Oh, I think we should leave," she said. But Lucien's eyes were scanning the crowd. "Oh, we can't." "Not yet. Someone here is a traitor. I need to know who before we vanish." Before Rhea could argue, the room fell into hush. A voice, amplified by spellwork, rang out from the balcony above. "Milords, ladies, and sovereigns of the dark," said a man with raven black hair and a twisted smile. "Please raise your glasses to the future." Rhea looked up and saw it. A shimmer of silver. Too fast, too deliberate. Lucien moved before she even registered what was happening. He shoved her back behind a pillar just as the bullet cracked through the air. The sound was deafening. Screams erupted. Glass shattered. Guards surged from the walls. Lucien had a gun in his hand within seconds. Not silver, dragon bone, silent, deadly. He fired once, then twice toward the high beams above. A body fell, crashing through one of the chandeliers. Blood painted the floor. Rhea's heart was in her throat. Her ears rang. Lucien grabbed her by the wrist. "We're leaving." Now. They ran through corridors gilded in gold, through twisting staircases and a hidden passage behind a bookshelf of ceremonial tomes. Lucien didn't stop until they were in the loading dock behind the cathedral. A sleek black car was already waiting. Varric was behind the wheel. "Go!" Lucien barked as he yanked the door open and shoved Rhea inside. She collapsed into the leather seat, heart still racing, dress torn at the hem. "Then they tried to kill me." Lucien got in beside her, gun still in his hand. "And they failed." She laughed. It was wild, high-pitched, half hysteria, half relief. But then her voice dropped. "Why did he say someone on the council signed the contract?" Lucien didn't answer for a moment. Then he said, said because I think I know who." Rhea turned to him. "Who?" Lucien looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time she saw something raw in his expression. Not just rage or possessiveness, not even lust, fear. "Your father," he said. The car tore off into the night, and the world behind them burned. The drive was long, winding, and silent. It had been nearly 2 hours since the botched assassination attempt, and Rhea still hadn't managed to calm the tremor in her fingers. She didn't ask where they were going. She didn't need to. The look on Lucien's face was carved in marble, cold, hard, unmoving. Whatever came next, he already knew, and it terrified her more than the bullet that missed her by inches. Outside the tinted windows, the city lights faded into forests. Trees stood tall like sentinels, and the air grew heavy with damp moss and the scent of pine. The road narrowed. Gravel crunched beneath tires. This was no ordinary escape route. This was planned, intentional. "Where are we?" she asked finally, voice low. Lucien didn't answer. He simply stared forward, one hand gripping the gun that lay quietly in his lap. It wasn't until the car pulled to a stop in front of a rust-covered iron gate that he spoke again. "This place doesn't exist on any map. It was erased from public records 5 years ago." Varric stepped out of the car to open the gate manually, his eyes scanning the woods around them. Rhea noted the slight limp in his gait, another injury that hadn't been there days ago. Something told her it wasn't from training. "Why?" she whispered. Lucien glanced at her. There was an ache behind his storm-gray eyes, something distant and bitter. "Then because I made it disappear." The estate came into view like a memory summoned from fog. It wasn't grand like she expected. No towers, no columns, no flashy marble. It was tucked into the trees, a 2-story manor wrapped in ivy and shadow. Its windows were tall and narrow, and every inch of its exterior was painted in soft charcoal, as if it were trying not to be seen. But the moment they stepped out of the car, Rhea felt something. Power, old and humming beneath the ground. This was a place woven in magic. No, not just magic. Emotion, grief, anger, and something else she couldn't yet name. Lucien opened the door without hesitation. Dust danced in golden shafts of moonlight. The air inside was still, heavy, and smelled faintly of cedar and faded paper. As she stepped into the foyer, her boots echoed across the wooden floor. A grand staircase curved upward in the shadows. Thick curtains were drawn across every window, sealing the place in twilight. "Oh, lived here?" she asked. Lucien didn't answer at first. He locked the door behind them, flicking several switches. Low, warm light spilled across the floor. The house came to life like a sleeping beast slowly waking. "And I was raised here," he said finally, moving past her. "Then before my parents died." She followed him through the main hall. The walls were lined with portraits, some old, some covered in cloth. Rhea saw herself reflected in a tarnished mirror, her gown dirty, her skin pale, her hair wild from wind and fear. Lucien stopped at the door to the study. "'Tis is the only place I come when I want to remember who I used to be." The room was filled with books, hundreds, maybe thousands. A cracked leather chair sat near the fireplace, and a chessboard frozen mid-game lay on the coffee table. She walked toward the mantel, her fingers brushing an old photo in a frame. A younger Lucien, maybe 15, with dark curls and haunted eyes, stood beside a woman who could only be his mother. She had the same sharp cheekbones, the same fire in her gaze. Rhea whispered, "You look small." He smirked faintly. "I was." She turned to him, softening. "And you brought me here." "Why?" Lucien leaned against the doorframe. "Because it's the only place I trust." "And not even your penthouse, or your safe house in the Alps?" He gave a hollow laugh. "Those places are secure, but they're not sacred." A pause. Then he added, "And because no one will think to look for me here. No one even knows this house still stands." Rhea moved slowly toward the fireplace and sat on the edge of the armchair. Her legs ached, her heart ached worse. "And do you really think my father wants me dead?" Lucien's silence was answer enough. "Hayes is on the council," he said after a beat, "and they're the only ones with enough influence to authorize a blood contract. You're not just a political inconvenience anymore, you're a symbol of rebellion." She looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" He pushed off the doorframe and began pacing. "The mate bond between you and Kyle was supposed to strengthen the pack alliance, join bloodlines, merge power. When he rejected you, it created instability. But now you're bonded to me, an outsider, a Mafia blood alpha. And worse, one with his own army. You've become a threat to their structure." Rhea stared into the fireplace, though there was no fire. "I never loved me," she said softly. Lucien didn't try to argue. She looked up. "But you say you don't believe in fate, in the bond, and yet you protect me like you do." "Why?" Lucien froze. His expression was unreadable. Shadows shifted across his face. Then, slowly, he walked over to her, knelt before her, took her hands. "Because I don't need fate to tell me what I feel." Her breath hitched. His fingers were warm, rough, calloused. Not the hands of a king, but of a man who'd fought for everything he owned. "I know what it's like to be alone, Rhea," he murmured. "To be cast aside, to wonder if anyone will ever see you as more than what you've lost. But I see you, and I don't need a bond to want to protect you." She stared at him. The man who had once walked away from a world of politics to build his own empire. The man who carried his grief in silence, who burned his enemies to the ground with unspoken rage. And yet he knelt before her like she was something holy. You don't have to protect me," she whispered. "I'm not fragile." "I know," he said. "But you're still mine." Then he leaned forward and pressed his lips to her knuckles, soft, reverent. The air between them crackled. She should have pulled away. Should have demanded answers, clarity, something. But instead she leaned forward. Her forehead touched his. The breath between them turned warm, shared, tangled. "Stay with me," he whispered. She closed her eyes. "I'm already here." The morning broke slow and muted through the heavy drapes. Outside, the forest was wrapped in mist. The cold was creeping, curling under windowsills and whispering against the old stone. Rhea woke curled on a velvet chaise lounge in the upstairs study, draped in an oversized cashmere throw that smelled faintly of Lucien, wood smoke, amber, and something darker, more primal. She hadn't meant to fall asleep. Her body simply gave in. But there was no regret. Not this time. Because when she opened her eyes and saw the fire still crackling low in the hearth, a steaming mug of coffee on the nearby table, and her boots placed neatly beside the chair, she knew someone had cared enough to make her comfort a priority, and that was a rare thing in her life. Lucien was nowhere to be seen. She stood, stretching muscles still sore from adrenaline and exhaustion. Her eyes wandered to the bookshelves surrounding her, all heavy with ancient leather spines, crumbling parchment, and folders bearing faded insignias. Curiosity pulled at her again, this time stronger. There was something about this house, about Lucien in this house, something old, hidden, secretive. She moved carefully across the hall and down the stairs, following the scent of coffee and cinnamon. The manor was waking up in quiet sighs, creaking floorboards, the rustle of leaves outside the stained glass windows, the hum of electricity in walls older than she'd guessed. And then she found the door. It was down a narrow hallway, behind a wooden panel that looked no different from the others, until she noticed the faint silver rune carved into its edge, almost invisible to the untrained eye. When she touched it, her fingers tingled. The panel creaked open to reveal a spiral staircase carved in black stone. Rhea hesitated, then descended. What waited below was no ordinary library. The room was circular, sunk deep into the earth, and lined from floor to ceiling in books sealed behind glass. In the center, a single oak table was covered in maps, blueprints, and a few blades that gleamed even in low light. Lit candles stood at the corners like watchful sentries, and behind the table stood Lucien, sleeves rolled up, tie discarded, hair damp as if he'd just showered. He didn't look surprised to see her, and figured you'd find this eventually, he said, eyes flicking up from an old leather-bound ledger. Rhea stepped slowly inside. What is this place? My father's collection. His research. His obsession. She ran her fingers across the edge of the table, pausing over a yellowed scroll that bore a strange mark, 2 wolves intertwined, one black, one silver. The paper looked older than the house itself. Sim believed in secrets, Lucien said, and he believed knowledge was a weapon. That's how he built our empire, not with brute strength, but with history, with truth hidden from the public eye. Rhea moved closer. What kind of truth? Lucien turned the book toward her. The page showed an old family tree. Her eyes scanned names written in elegant script, until her own last name jumped out at her. Blackwell. Once your family and mine were once connected, he said quietly. And 5 generations ago. Bloodlines were split after a war no one remembers, because it was wiped from every record. She stared at the name beside his ancestor. A woman, Helena Blackwell. "See married into your family," she whispered. Lucien nodded. And then she was erased from your family's official registry. No explanation, no scandal, just gone. Why? And that's what I've been trying to uncover. He moved aside a set of maps and revealed a stack of journals. There was something powerful about the union between our bloodlines, something dangerous. The old alphas feared it, which is why they built the council, to control, to regulate, to ensure that no one ever wielded both legacies again. And now, I do. He met her gaze. Yes, you do. The silence grew heavy. Rhea's hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of knowing. From the sudden realization that she wasn't just a rejected mate or a pawn, she was something ancient, something they tried to destroy before it bloomed. I need to learn, she said quietly, everything. About your world, my world, how to fight, how to defend myself. I can't be a liability anymore. Lucien studied her for a long, tense moment, then nodded. Oh, then you'll start today. And training with Lucien was not like training with the pack warriors she'd grown up around. There were no wooden dummies or public sparring circles, no ranking systems or flashy competitions. Lucien trained in silence, precision, control. He brought her to the underground gym built into the base of the manor. It was dimly lit, lined with mirrors, punching bags, weapon racks, and a padded ring in the center. A day we build foundation, he said, tossing her a pair of gloves. He learned to breathe, to listen, to survive. He didn't hold back, not even in the first hour. He threw her into the floor once, then twice. Taught her how to roll with the hit, how to use her weight, how to unlearn everything she thought she knew about fighting. "I'm not here to pamper you," he said between strikes. "I'm here to make sure the next time someone pulls a trigger, you're the one who walks away." By the 4th hour, she was bruised, sweating, panting, but her eyes glowed with something new. Fire. Lucien knelt beside her as she slumped against the padded wall, water bottle in hand. He wiped blood from her lip with his thumb, so gently it made her chest ache. You're a fast learner, he said quietly. And motivated, she replied. He smiled, soft, rare, so good, because the council won't wait. What do you mean? He handed her a scroll, newly translated. It bore the seal of the High Alpha Council, and a single line written in dark red ink, and Rhea Blackwell is to be neutralized by the blood moon. Her stomach turned to stone. That's in 3 weeks. Lucien nodded. And we fight, she whispered. No, Lucien said, his voice low and dangerous. Oh, we burn them down. The storm rolled in like a promise. Thunder cracked over the Blackmore Mountains as Rhea stood in the circular library again, the hidden world beneath Lucien's manor now familiar, almost sacred. But tonight, the air felt different, charged, brittle, as if the secrets in the room had finally grown impatient. Rhea's fingers trembled as she opened the small velvet-covered diary they'd discovered behind the false panel in the library wall. It had taken Lucien hours to bypass the arcane lock, a seal of blood and intent, old magic that reeked of protection spells and desperation. The handwriting inside was delicate, looping, feminine. Helena Blackwell, the woman erased from every record, the woman whose blood ran through Rhea's veins. She read aloud, slowly, while Lucien stood nearby, silent and watchful. And to the daughter who may one day find this, I pray the world has become less cruel. But if not, know this, they feared us for a reason, not because we were dangerous, but because we were whole. Benai fell in love with an alpha who understood balance. He was not perfect, but he was kind and wise, and he did not fear my wolf. Together, we had a daughter, and the council branded her an abomination. Senene called it unnatural for a woman to carry 2 lineages. They said no wolf should have both light and shadow in her blood. But I called her mine, and I hid her. Her name was Isolde. She is your blood. Rhea's heart stopped, and heard that name before. Lucien turned sharply. Where? In my grandmother's stories. She always whispered about a girl with silver eyes and fire in her skin. She said I had the same flame. I thought she was making it up. So or you weren't just born strong, Lucien said, voice tight with awe. You're descended from the one who survived their purge. Rhea closed the diary with shaking hands. All her life she'd wondered what made her feel out of place. Her rejection from her fated mate hadn't just been cruel, it had been calculated, instinctual maybe, like even he had sensed she didn't belong in the hierarchy they knew. And now it made sense. She wasn't just an Omega who rose by accident. She was born to lead. That night, she found Lucien standing in the training ring again, alone, shirtless, barefoot, practicing combinations with movements so fluid they looked like dance. Sweat glistened across his skin. The firelight caught in his dark eyes. Rhea stepped into the ring without a word. Lucien stopped. You need rest. I need focus, she said. And let's spar. He raised a brow. Are you sure? I've never been more sure. He didn't hold back. Neither did she. They collided in a flurry of movement, breath, and sweat. Rhea's body responded to his like it had been trained by it, molded by it. Each step was memory now. Each strike was her answer to a lifetime of being underestimated. She ducked under a punch, pivoted, and landed on her feet, ready. Lucien froze. Not because she had surprised him, but because in the flickering firelight her eyes glowed. Not gold, not amber, but silver. You're shifting, he breathed. But she wasn't in pain. Her bones didn't break. Her body didn't tremble. The shift was slow, elegant, like she was merely becoming. Rhea stepped closer. So what happens now? She whispered. Lucien looked at her. Truly looked. And she saw something there she hadn't before. Not just attraction, not even desire. Devotion. And I've faced kings and killers, he said. But you terrify me, Rhea Blackwell. Why? Pinned because I'd burn down my entire empire if you asked me to. The silence that followed was heavy with truth, and then, finally, his mouth found hers. There was no hesitation, no fumbling, no fear. He kissed her like a vow. Like her mouth had been crafted for his, like every promise he had never made aloud had already been written in the way his hands gripped her hips, the way he cradled the back of her head, the way he held her like the world might break around them and he'd still never let her fall. It was a kiss that spoke of war and surrender, of loyalty and longing. When they finally pulled apart, breathless, foreheads pressed together, Rhea didn't speak. She didn't have to. The choice was made. The following morning, the council struck. They didn't send envoys, they sent assassins. 6 men in black arrived before sunrise, silent, deadly, trained in magic and steel. They came through the woods like shadows, masked, armed, bloodthirsty. But they didn't expect Lucien's estate to be warded. They didn't expect Rhea to be waiting. She moved like fire, precise, relentless, a fury with silver eyes and the memory of Helena Blackwell in her soul. Lucien fought beside her, a blur of claws and brutality, protecting her back without needing to look over his shoulder. Together, they dismantled the council's elite in under 15 minutes. When the last man fell, coughing blood onto the marble floor of Lucien's foyer, Rhea stood over him. She crouched, took his blade and pressed it gently against his throat. "Untell them," she said, voice steady, "and not running." He tried to spit, but she pressed harder, enough to silence him with pain. "And tell them I remember." Then she let him go. Lucien watched her. "You're not the girl I met," he said quietly. "No," Rhea said, rising. "And the woman they tried to erase." The world didn't fall silent after the assassins came. It roared. Word spread through the underworld faster than wildfire, that the council had declared war not on a rogue pack, but on Lucien Delacroix, and on a woman they couldn't categorize, couldn't contain. Whispers of Rhea's silver eyes moved from lips to ears across borders, over phones, through encrypted channels, inked in urgent texts and panicked-coded messages. They called her the Forgotten Heir. They called her Shadowfire. But Rhea Blackwell didn't care about their names for her. She cared about the truth. And now she was ready to set it on fire. Lucien's war room was buried 3 floors underground. It was lined in steel and obsidian, flickering with screens that showed the shifting territories, the movements of council fleets, their contacts, their internal power struggles. It smelled of cold air and expensive weaponry. Rhea stood at the center table in leggings and a worn hoodie, her hair in a braid down her back, eyes trained on the projection above the table. "I want their tower," she said. Lucien glanced at her, brow raised. "When their headquarters is in the eastern capital, that place is a fortress." "Soon good," she said. "I don't want it easy." He stepped beside her, voice low. "And know if we go to war, this won't be about diplomacy. This will be blood. This will be every rule they've ever followed thrown to ash." Rhea met his gaze. "They tried to end me before I was born. They tried to end you when you broke away." "I'm not interested in diplomacy anymore, Lucien. I'm interested in justice." He exhaled, something dark and feral flickering in his eyes. "And then I'll build you a throne from the bones of every man who doubted you." The next morning, the council's tower rose in the distance like a jagged tooth against the steel-colored sky. Rhea stood on the edge of a wind-swept cliff, watching it from miles away. Her wolf stirred under her skin, not with rage, but with clarity. For once, there was no fear in her blood, just purpose. Lucien stood behind her, hands in his coat pockets, watching the same tower. "Do you regret this?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. "And regret waiting this long," she finally said. "And regret believing for years that I was weak because someone else told me I was. But I don't regret you." Lucien turned to her. There was a question in his eyes that had been building for weeks. No, for months. He stepped closer. "If we survive this," he said, "what happens to us?" Rhea's throat tightened. "I don't know," she said honestly, but I want the chance to find out." That was all he needed. He kissed her then, not in passion but in something softer, quieter, a promise without conditions. When they pulled back, Rhea whispered, "Oh, see, take the tower tomorrow. And tonight?" She smiled faintly. "Tonight, we prepare." That night, the estate buzzed with tension. Allies flooded in from every border. Rogues loyal to Lucien arrived on motorcycles, tattoos inked across throats and knuckles, some carrying enchanted blades, others bringing stolen scrolls of forgotten laws. Witches from the southern covens arrived in silence, their eyes glowing, their leader nodding once at Rhea, as if they had been waiting years for this moment. Even a few seers, neutral until now, came with warnings etched on their skin, offering whispers of what might come if the council fell. And at the heart of it all was Rhea. She moved like a storm queen among them, checking supplies, speaking to scouts, memorizing entrances and weak points in the tower. She didn't just lead, she commanded. Lucien watched from a distance. He had seen war leaders before. He had seen kings, alphas, generals. But Rhea? She didn't rule by dominance. She ruled by presence, by purpose, by the burning truth that she no longer needed to prove herself to anyone. Later that night, Lucien found her sitting in the greenhouse, her secret place, among overgrown orchids and sleeping moonflowers, their petals still glistening from the earlier rain. She didn't turn when he entered. "And I've read the rest of the diary," she said softly. He paused. "And?" She never meant for Isolde to run. She wanted her to rise. But the fear was too strong. Isolde gave birth to a line of wolves who learned how to hide. "I won't hide anymore." Lucien crouched in front of her, took her hands. "And I don't want you to become someone else tomorrow. You don't have to become a monster to beat one." Rhea smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm not afraid of becoming a monster," she whispered. "I'm afraid of becoming what they wanted me to be." He leaned forward until their foreheads touched. "I love you," he said. It was the first time he'd said it, and the world didn't end. Instead, something new began in the silence between them. Stronger than blood, deeper than fate. She squeezed his hand. "And fight beside me, always." The morning of the attack came, gray skies, cold wind, a silence that crackled like lightning just before it strikes. They moved at dawn. Lucien led the front. Rhea, wearing armor woven from moonsteel and laced with old magic, led the second wave. The tower defenses fell faster than expected, but the council had one final weapon, a creature they had kept locked in the vaults beneath their chamber, a wolf the size of a small house, eyes pitch black, snarling, unthinking. It had once been a shifter, now stripped of its mind and soul, a tortured beast crafted from dozens of broken alphas. Rhea stood before it, staring it down, even as the others screamed for her to fall back. But she didn't. She dropped her weapons, stepped forward, and shifted. Not fully, just enough to show her eyes, silver and glowing, and her skin, now laced with flame under the surface. She didn't fight the monster. She spoke to it. "You were not born this way," she whispered, her voice echoing inside the beast's skull. "And you were made, but you can choose to stop." For a moment, the air stilled. Then the creature bowed its head and collapsed. Dead? No. Free. The council's last weapon had surrendered. And Rhea stepped over its body and into the council chambers like a queen reclaiming her throne. By nightfall, the tower had fallen, and Rhea Blackwell stood before the blood-stained window of the highest room, the council's crest broken at her feet. Lucien came to stand beside her. "I'll come for you now," he said quietly. "Others, ones who've kept quiet until now, and he let them," she replied, "and not afraid of what's next." He looked at her with something like reverence. "What will you do?" She turned, silver eyes gleaming. "I'm going to change everything." The air smelled different now. Not of blood, nor smoke, nor steel, but of possibility. The sun crept up behind the broken silhouette of the council tower, casting long golden rays through shattered glass and ruined stone. The battlefield had fallen silent. The voices of soldiers, allies, witches, and wolves no longer murmured with fear or uncertainty. They now stood quietly, surrounding the tower from every side, watching, waiting. For her, Rhea Blackwell stepped out onto the topmost balcony. Her hair was loose, tousled by the wind. The sunlight painted a halo around her, touching the burnished silver of her armor, scarred and dented, but still gleaming. A cloak wrapped around her shoulders, bloodied but regal, bearing no crest. She didn't belong to any pack. She was the pack. Behind her, Lucien stood like a sentinel, silent, unyielding, watchful. His presence wasn't dominating. It never had to be. He was there not to shield her but to stand with her. And when Rhea raised her hand, the crowd quieted entirely. She didn't roar, she didn't demand. She spoke, and her voice carried through the wind like truth. "Sanai was born nameless, powerless. A mistake in a world that only valued strength and bloodlines. They told me I wasn't enough. They told me to be silent, that I didn't matter, that I was disposable." A breeze swept her hair across her face, but she didn't falter, then they were wrong. A murmur of agreement rippled below. The wolves shifted forward, ears alert. The witches bowed their heads. Even the most skeptical in the crowd looked toward her with the quiet recognition that something was changing. "I don't want to rule by fear," she continued. "And I don't want to build an empire like theirs, where power is hoarded and pain is passed down like tradition. I want something new, something ours." Her silver eyes scanned the horizon. "From this day forward, there is no council. There is no caste, no rogue, no branded, no alpha-born or discarded omega. There is only choice, and you all have one." She paused. "Hunt, you can follow me. Not as a queen, not as an alpha, but as someone who will bleed for this future with you, or you can walk away, and I will not hold it against you." She waited. The silence was sharp. Then one by one they knelt. A rogue from the eastern provinces dropped to one knee. A young witch touched her forehead to the ground. A group of former enforcers who once swore to the council lowered their heads. And finally, Lucien moved beside her, took a knee without a word, his hand over his heart. Not because she asked, but because he believed. And in that moment, she was no longer the rejected girl from a broken pack. She was the new beginning. The days that followed blurred into movement. The council's ruins were dismantled brick by brick, and in its place, something new began to grow. Rhea didn't claim a throne, she claimed space. She called together wolves, humans, witches, and seers to rebuild a sanctuary, not a capital. A home for the outcasts, the unwanted, the feared. A new city began to rise in the valley below the cliffs, filled with light, trade, laughter, and purpose. She created a law council made of elders, youth, witches, and even humans from border towns. One of her first decrees was that no bond could ever again be broken without both parties consenting. No more rejection rituals without consequence. No more pain disguised as tradition. And Lucien? He didn't disappear into the shadows. He sold his cartel. He dismantled the last arms of his Mafia empire and turned the profits over to fund education, infrastructure, and reintegration for displaced shifters. He said goodbye to the past without mourning it. He had already chosen his future. With her, one evening, weeks later, Rhea stood on the rooftop of the still under construction hall, barefoot, staring at the stars. They felt closer now, like they weren't something she had to beg for. Lucien joined her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "Oh, if you're not sleeping," he said gently. "Too much to do," she said, but leaned into his warmth. He brushed her hair from her neck and kissed the spot behind her ear. "And you've done enough for one lifetime." "Not yet," she murmured. "But I'm close." They stood in silence for a long time, looking out over the glowing city in the valley. Then Lucien pulled something from his pocket. A thin, simple ring made from obsidian and starlight. A piece of the council tower melted with iron from her old home. "I don't want to own you," he said, voice quiet and steady. "I said I don't want a bond forced by blood or fate. I just want you. If you'll have me." Rhea stared at the ring for a long moment, and then, smiling softly, she took his hand. "And I chose myself first," she whispered, "and now I choose you." She slipped the ring on her finger, and just like that the last weight of her past fell away. Epilogue. Years later, when the world had shifted and settled, and old powers had crumbled into dust, children would ask their mothers who rebuilt the world. They wouldn't speak of kings or councils. They would speak of a girl once rejected, a woman who carved a future from her own scars, and a love that didn't demand, didn't cage, but grew beside her like a garden in a wasteland. They would say, she chose her path, she chose her mate, and she changed everything, not because of a prophecy, not because fate demanded it, but because she dared to believe she was enough, and she was, forever. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you loved it and you would love for a part 2, kindly comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more amazing content. Drop a comment with your favorite moment, and I'll see you in the next one.